I'm Phil Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and welcome to my vlog, where it's both my mission and my pleasure to highlight my creative journey in hopes of giving you inspiration, specific takeaway, all that way your creative journey can be at least a little bit easier. Now, this past week has been a kaleidoscope of things happening. But before I fully get into everything, I would like to take the opportunity to invite you to subscribe if you haven't already. That way you get all the various lessons and episodes that I put out right when I put them out. Thank you if you just did, and thank you if you already were. It truly does mean a lot to me, as I hope it does to you. So, one of the sort of big announcements that people, certainly directly in my life, have been asking is how they can see my latest full-length film, wherever they're at, right? So the film is called A Bogota Trip, and the good news is until October 2nd, it is available to stream as part of the Liftoff Global Film Festival. That's right. It's a great festival for first-time and second-time directors, which I am a second-time director. And they really champion indie films. I had a great experience with them for Love Market, and now, with this one I submitted to them, it's in. And so it is available until October 2nd. So that means wherever you are, whether you're my friends in Boston, Nashville, Chicago, Colombia, wherever in the world you may be, you have access to view this movie. So the link for that is down in the description. Or you can just type in tinyurl.com/Bogota Trip Movie, and that'll take you to a checkout page, right? And it's $12, and that gives you access to all the films within that festival. So once you fill out, the payment page, you'll get a link, and you'll have access to it all. Now, in terms of the listing, you'll have to scroll down. You'll know what I mean once you do it. We are movie number 17, so you can click that and watch A Bogota Trip. Now, you're also welcome to watch all the other movies there too, right? I'm going to check out some of the other ones. I kind of just click through the descriptions of the various ones, and they seem, very promising. So, lots of good stuff there that I look forward to, as should you. But certainly, check out A Bogota Trip if that's of interest. And there will be a voting component later on down the line. So, check your inbox once you sign up for that festival to watch all those movies. It'll give you instructions on how to properly vote. So I hope you vote for us. A big theme of this past week has been movies in general, right? We, in fact, had our second in-person screening for A Bogota Trip as part of the Independent Filmmakers Showcase. And I guess just taking a quick step back, if you're unfamiliar with what the hell A Bogota Trip is, it's my second feature film, as I mentioned, and it's about two sets of American tourists, one being a bachelorette party, one being a group of guys. They bump into each other, and it's a will they, won't they type of story. But of course, if they, proceed romantically, it could spell disaster for them back home. So that's kind of what it is in a nutshell, right? If you love movies such as Before Sunrise by Richard Linklater, or, Happy Together from Wong Kar-wai, or Vicky Cristina Barcelona, Parallel Mothers, these are sort of in the same tone as this movie, right? So, we had our second screening, and it was a good turnout. We got a time slot of essentially 11 a.m. on Friday morning. So, 11 a.m. on Labor Day weekend on Friday, not the best time slot, but one of those interesting things that we had quite a good number of people show up. And it's always one of those things that just reiterates to me the idea that stop trying to chase numbers, right? And accept the people that showed up, because, we had, let's say, about 25 people. But if I was like, oh, I really wish we had at least 30 or 40, whatever it may be, without knowing it, you essentially discredit the people that did show up, right? It's like, oh, so you've just reduced me down to a number. And in many ways, by having that smaller number, it was awesome, because with the first screening, our premiere, we pretty much packed the house, and it was great. It was fantastic, but I didn't get that sort of FaceTime afterwards. It was all like, hey, congrats, really, job well done type of thing, and you move on to other people because you're trying to, acknowledge everyone for coming. Whereas here, we could go essentially a little bit deeper, and, people were telling me unprompted, like, what really resonated with them and why they loved it, and it was just great to see. So there's benefits to both, I think, and, my goal with this movie in terms of its festival run was just to get some face time with people, right? Because I love Market, which was my first movie. It did well, but that was during the pandemic where everything was virtual, and although it won awards, it feels disconnected, right? Because you just get this email of like, people enjoyed your movie, and it's like, that's great, but I never got to see their reactions. Whereas here, in the 2 times that we've screened it, it really was fantastic to see those people. Now, I will say what's interesting about just life in general, right? Don Miguel Ruiz, who wrote The Voice of Knowledge and The 4 Agreements, The 4 Agreements being the more popular of his works, but I think, The Voice of Knowledge is actually the best. Anyway, one of the agreements that he talks about is be impeccable with your word, right? And it's interesting how, well-intentioned people can be, and yet they aren't impeccable with their word. And what I mean by this is, in this instance, right, there was so many people that said, I will be there, and unfortunately weren't, right? Now, am I upset by that? No. It's just interesting to me that people aren't essentially impeccable with their word, because, I sort of look at it and I could see a world where I or somebody else, like if you tell somebody you're going to be there and then you're not, you've set up an expectation and then there's disappointment, right? Which is why for me, I do try to have my words really mean something. Like when I say I'm going to do something, I do everything I can to deliver. And, just in general, like just the honesty of like, if I can't make something, letting them know like, hey, I really wish I could be there. I'm so sorry, I can't. Right? And I think more than ever, people have recognized that within me, because I have been, if I say I'm going to go see someone's show, whatever, I do show up, right? Or sometimes I don't even say anything and I just show up there and they're like, oh, wow, you came to support. And yeah, it's a big component that I don't think enough of us lean on, is to be able to support our friends, and yes, we'll hide behind the idea that, oh, I've got too much going on, I've got to work on my stuff, I've got to focus on my stuff. But we really, all of us need a community of support, because eventually, when you do finish that project, who's going to come out to see it if you haven't built that with people in your life, right? And that's why I knew, without sounding arrogant, that at the premiere we could sell out, because I knew I'd been there for a lot of people, and I know there was enough curiosity, and they wanted to see. Partly they were doing me a favor, but also they weren't, because they knew that the work of myself and everyone else involved, it's not just me, would be up to a good standard, right? There's a bar that I've always set, and people recognize that, right? Because to get people to come out to any one of your things is a very difficult thing. It really is. One of the things I looked at as part of the festival, I came to see some other movies. This was on Saturday, and more of a primetime slots. And for all intents and purposes, there were some screenings where we had more people at our 11 a.m. slot than they did. Now, some of them were from out of town. Like what's nice is that we're like local. I'm LA based, and this was an LA film festival in downtown LA. So, I have people here, whereas, if, let's say I went to play in Nashville, where my friend Jonathan Moulton lives, we'd get his family and things like that. Could we pack the house? Probably not, right? It's not my home turf, if using a sports term. But still, it's just kind of interesting in that sense to think about. And all the more reason why, for me, so what had happened was on Saturday night, there was a red carpet event. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll go. And I decided to go a little bit earlier so, I could check out some movies, do the red carpet thing, and then, possibly go home. And so I went there and, managed to get in right at the start of this movie called Burn Me Twice. And it was fantastic, It's a movie, think of like film noir meets zombies, done in the style of like Sin City or Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow, if you're familiar with that movie. And for me, that's definitely my jam. And it was a lot of fun, right? And again, I just hearing the director talk about it, like it took him 5 years to, animate everything after filming it and so forth. So this was like a big coming out party for them. And so I wanted them to know, like, hey, I really enjoyed your movie. It's almost that sort of thing of, if you see something, say something, but not in New York subway sort of style, but more in the sense how, people advise that in life, if you're thinking about somebody, text them like, hey, I miss you. Or as my friend Ian Kaiser always does, whenever he ends a phone call, he always says, I love you, buddy. And he does it with everybody because, you just never know how life goes. And he wants the last thing that he said, if anything should go awry, to be something positive, even if, we were in the middle of like a heated argument about, the rehearsal, Nathan Fielder or whatever, right? And that's what I appreciate about him. So it kind of speaks to that aspect of it. Because, as indie filmmakers, these moments are so few and far between. Again, 5 years for this guy to, just do the post-production on this movie. It's a hell of a long time, right? And not just time, that's a hell of a lot of effort. And it's all there on screen. But yeah, damn, so it's like to get this like 2 hour screening and then maybe, just like a 5 minutes worth of a Q&A or something like that. It's like, in many ways, as the artist, you have to really love the process because that's all you're really probably going to get. B, when you do get those moments, really enjoy them, And after this movie, Burn Me Twice, I went to the red carpet, and then through that sort of press line, if you will, I met the team behind 25 cents per minute. And, I started talking with them, and they were like, it's actually quite serendipitous because, they were having the red carpet now, and our world premiere is, in like 20 minutes. It's like, oh, okay, cool. And again, just another opportunity to be impeccable with my word. I was like, yeah, I'll go. I was like, and I think so many people are just used to hearing that, but it's just words, right? The talk doesn't match the walk, so to speak. But I was like, no, I'm gonna, I did kind of say it blindly, but then I was like, you know what? No, I said it, so now I have to hold myself accountable and go. And I'm glad I did, because it's an anthology film about people in LA. The through line is they all use payphones, the last remaining payphones in LA. It's kind of like a love letter to Los Angeles, and it's beautiful vignettes that ultimately weave together through this tapestry to create a beautiful story with a really good core message. And in some ways, it reminded me of my first film, Love Market, because that in a sense is also a love letter to LA. That's filmed primarily in Grand Central Market. And I always knew I wanted to have Grand Central Market as a hub for characters to come in and out. It's less of an anthology film, but still, I was really moved by the project, and it was, as I understand it, it was the director's first film. Really well done, right? Really, really well done. Now, the thing of it was, the movie ends, the lights don't come on, and they were expecting to do a Q&A, but they never had that opportunity. And it's kind of interesting, in that sense, again, just how quickly this stuff all goes. I remember in our premiere, the lights didn't come on, but I wasn't going to not have a Q&A. I mean, we essentially packed the house, and so, I invited the cast and crew up with me, and even in the dark, we were going to have a Q&A. And then eventually the lights did come on, which, by the way, you can watch that Q&A on YouTube as well. But it does make me feel sad because, that team never got that moment. And, it's one of those things, you can't really blame the film festivals for that. A lot of the ones that, first-time filmmakers and people that don't have star talent can get into, they're understaffed, really, and they're running around and doing the best that they can. And in many ways, they're at the mercy of these theaters who it's not their regular routine to, do X, Y, and Z, which for us, the disappointing thing of it all was there were requirements for this film festival to have a 4K version of the movie, and that's a very specific format. It's not just a file that you would upload to YouTube or something like that. It has to be on a hard drive, acceptable for theaters, right? It's called the digital cinema package, and the hard drive is not one that many people have heard of, and it's in a format that you have to go to a specialist to create. So it costs money. It costs good money, especially for a 4K version and so forth. But we did it, knowing that this was going to be our master version, and we would want to take it to other festivals. But it was going to be yeah, great. This is going to be projected in beautiful 4K. Well, because we were literally the first screening of the day, they literally opened up shop right before, as essentially we were supposed to start playing. That, my understanding is that the theater wasn't ready, and so rather than take the time and then eventually bleed into other screenings, they essentially just played a backup of the movie, which, let's just say, wasn't 4K, right? And while it sounds like for me, everyone did enjoy the movie, and I think that's the testament of a good movie, is that in spite of whatever flaws they may be, that people enjoy it. But there's a side of you, or at least for me, that it's you just work so hard and it costs you all this money, and this is essentially what you're getting. And again, it's less it's both a personal thing, but I also don't want it for other people. Again, that's why I talked about 25 cents per minute, beautiful, beautiful film, and it was their premiere, and they didn't get a Q&A. It's just all this work for just these tiny moments, and even though you're at the mercy of just something else completely. And as I said, you can't necessarily blame anybody. It just kind of is what it is. But doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, right? And that's what sucks about it. And I really wish, there was a little bit more fanfare for stuff like this. I really do. Just seeing what's happening in Venice, the Venice Film Festival and Telluride, these, like 10-minute standing ovations or whatever. Like, if we had a 10-minute standing ovation for us, we wouldn't have gotten a Q&A, because that was all basically the time we had for a Q&A, right? So it's just, just very interesting, all this. And that's why I knew for when we had our premiere, it was just the idea, like, listen, COVID could, who knows, right? COVID could re-hit tomorrow. This could be like the only time we play in front of people. Let's just go for it, right? So there was a red carpet. I got our own sort of host to interview the cast beforehand, and film the Q&A and stuff like that, because I wanted it to feel truly special. And in spite of whatever may have come, I was going to make it the best that it was ever going to be. And that was awesome. It really was that. So, if nothing else, just another example of how, sadly, as an indie artist, you got to take control of your own efforts, and it sucks, especially, like, it's such a grind to get a movie over the finish line, and yet, you still got to keep going. You got to be the one to market it. You got to be the one to get it out there. But when you embrace that, it just is what it is, and you can lean into it and still get people, 25 people to show up at 11 a.m. on a Friday of Labor Day weekend, when most people have gone out of town, right? Or still at work. So, yeah, that in that sense, just a lot of those movies. Also, to wrap up, like, let's call it the movie portion, the movie viewing aspect of all of it. I also saw Beast, the one of two Idris Elba movies out. This one is about him in Africa with his family, and I really enjoyed it. It was a really good movie, very well paced, not long at all. I also saw the latest Dragon Ball movie. I enjoyed that. I think you have to be a Dragon Ball fan to really enjoy it, so it's not for everybody, but I am, and I did. Then 3,000 Years of Longing, which is George Miller's latest film, George Miller being the director of Mad Max Fury Road. 3,000 Years of Longing, the trailers made it look good, but it just didn't hit for me, unfortunately, so I didn't enjoy that. And then at the start of the week, I saw The Invitation, which looked like a Ready or Not type of horror film, and sadly, it just never got going, at least for me, right? So a lot of movies were seen this past week. Likewise, let's get into the sort of nitty gritty. So with a Bogota trip, the phase that I'm at is giving deliverables to the next phase of things, which is distribution, right? And so as part of all of this, one needs to create subtitles, captions, have screenshots and other materials, right? And it's a very laborious process that, even as someone within the film industry, right, when I consume TV, and every now and then I put on the captions, or sometimes I have to because it's a foreign language movie. It's a side that we don't even think about. I was going to say we underappreciate, but I don't think we even think about, right? It's no different than a book translation, right? You take someone like Gabriel Garcia Marquez or Franz Kafka, that the original works were written in different languages, and yet they're hits here in the US, and it's like, well, why? Because of the translations, right? Those works had to be translated to work for, English-speaking audiences. And if someone didn't give a crap, it has the potential to ruin it. It's not as simple as just running it through, nowadays like Google Translate or whatever and getting something back. Especially if it's comedic in nature, you have to account for that. And so it's been a really interesting process for me, and I'll do a separate video about this, like walking you through the step-by-steps, but really the process for me was take the dialogue track, throw it in automated transcription service, and there's plenty of them. Get that back, and you can spit out a subtitle file, and then essentially revise that within the editing program, right? Because it would get me close enough. Now it wasn't starting from scratch. It had rough timing. It had the rough semblance of what was said, but now I could finesse it in terms of the English language. And so a lot of time spent on that, and just making sure that, as I said, it flows, right? That it's not an afterthought, that really the people who would need captions and subtitles, that that they would get to enjoy the movie no different than anybody else, right? Also, as part of the marketing for the movie, just grabbing screenshots and things of that nature. And it's been a really interesting exercise seeing the movie through this new perspective of, essentially through the subtitling, you're just like specifically listening for dialogue. So like you're honed in on a level that you haven't been before, right? And it's a very start process. As far as screenshots, I essentially watched the movie from start to finish, just visually, right? I turned off the audio just visually, and if I saw something that I liked, then I paused and grabbed it. And it was great to get feedback from the marketing team saying, I pulled some really dynamic shots. And that's good, because I essentially had to pull 50 of these, right? Which 50 is a large number. Ultimately it's more than they would ever need, but they want to have options and be able to choose for themselves. And it's interesting as well, because a lot of times people say, a filmmaker shouldn't do his own trailer or do his own marketing, things like that. And I don't think I necessarily agree. I don't know. I think part of it depends on, knowing yourself and knowing your abilities. But there's just a side to it. Like, I think when it, like, for example, with screenshots, I just think when you know the movie, you're going to pick the better moments than someone perhaps going into it, because, through no fault of their own, they're not as familiar with the movie. And like all of us, we're really pressed for time. And so, you're just going to be like, okay, cool. The movie's 90 minutes. I'm going to dedicate 2 hours to pulling screenshots, whatever, right? Whereas for me, I think I literally pulled in like 4 or 5 hours. Like, it took a while, I really made sure, like, as I was going through it, and it's a process to, start and stop and pull those moments and make sure that, you're getting the best one, like you're literally nitpicking the frame of like, okay, one frame over, one of the characters is slightly out of focus, whereas if I go one frame forward, everyone's in focus. Okay, cool, let me get that one. Or in the case of me, a lot of the shots involve 5 people. So it's like, okay, this shot right here looks good for, 2 out of the 3. And because of the nature of the scene, the other 2 are kind of turned away, and it's not as dynamic of a image. It makes sense in the movie and so forth, but within like just a printout, it's could be better, right? So a lot of precision went into it, right? And it was something that I was talking about with my friend Jeff Graham, like, just you want what represents the movie in the best way. And a lot of times, like, directing just comes down to taste, and people, it's interesting how many people think they have taste. But when push comes to shove, it's interesting what they come up with. And again, it could just be, the simplicity of time is not on their side, but because that's an added benefit to me. Like, I know the movie backwards and forwards, whereas they don't. So now, one of my goals also this past week was to just start production on the short film that I've not necessarily been putting off because, I've had a lot to deal with in terms of Bogota trip, promoting it, as well as deliverables, as I talked about with the subtitles. But, as that winds down, I wanted to get into the flow of this short film project that it's essentially a parody, and just is going to be a lot of fun to create. And so in September, I want to just get production wrapped and then work on it in October and November and yada yada, right? And get it finished up. Well, it was quite serendipitous because my friend Megan Lynn, she flew into town, and she's a journalist as well as an actress, and she's just doing phenomenal stuff already in spite of her young age. And so, it was just serendipitous that I was like, all right, yeah, let's film this thing. She had to film an audition for herself. I was like, all right, well, you can use my stuff to film your audition, and since we're going to be together, let's essentially film a few of the shots for my film. Now, the shots themselves, it's a very, it won't make sense without knowing the script, and I don't want to give the script away, but there's a lot of, specific shots that go into it, much like, Sin City was made where it was all shot against green screen, and even more, and then everything was placed in. But even more so than that, a lot of times, the two actors interacting with a scene weren't even on set at the same time. So it's kind of in that same style, right? And so when you do something like that, having done this, you need to be very specific. You need to have it very well planned out. And when you shoot, you only get the specific stuff that you really need. So, an angle of this line, an angle of this line, blah, blah, blah. And when you do it like that, I don't know, for me, it's always been a little bit jarring because it ends up being so quick. And it's like, I guess that's it, right? Like, you almost feel, not imposter syndrome, but this weird sense of like, well, did I get everything? I know I technically did. Like, literally, I have everything mapped out. I've checked it off. But do I have it, right? Because it's so piecemealed and it's so quick, right? It just blink and you'll miss it type of thing. And, you can just, from their perspective, it's like, did we get everything? And it's like, yeah. And there's a lot of trust that is, put on their part that this will work out, right? But it does. It just takes time, It's similar to, as I was talking about at the Independent Filmmaker Showcase, the film Bury Me Twice. It was done in that same sort of way, which is just weird to film, because you're literally acting against nothing and everything is, added in later. And yet it does work, right? Like, people have proven it works, and the result can be amazing and beautiful. But you just have to, it's kooky in the moment, and it's weird. So, especially for someone for me, like, I know it's possible and I've done it enough times, but at the same time, my training is in documentary filmmaking, and so you're filming like what is, especially in that moment, and so it's just a different beast ultimately. So I filmed with Megan, and then also I filmed with my friend Lucia. And so it was good to kind of kick that off. Now, just very simple shots. The bulk of what we need is, going to be done a little bit later, but I'm excited. At least it got the ball rolling, and so we're gonna, continue on that way. The other sort of thing at the start of the week, and in fact last weekend, I took a cooking class. This was with Chef Piet, who won Next Level Chef, and it's interesting. Like, I'm I'm more trying to get out and do stuff that I normally wouldn't do. And so a cooking class certainly falls into that. And it was done at La Plaza Cocina, which I never heard of, but apparently in downtown LA, they do all kinds of cooking classes there. And, it's just great to sort of see, and I think, moments like that are important for all artists because, part of it is you have to tear yourself out from your day-to-day routine and see what life exists out there, so that way what you create is infused with that, right? And just appreciate the beauty around you in all the ways, right? So that was a fun thing to get to do. And sort of a big thing, I went to therapy this weekend, and it was like the culmination of just all the work that I've been doing to sort of lead up to the moment, right? Of, what's preventing you essentially from being present. And, any awakening or enlightenment or self-help, whatever you want to call it, is a journey, right? And has to be seen as that. Like, you're not going to cure yourself overnight, no matter what the best therapists, with the best tools. Like, it's just, it took a while to, essentially poison the well. And so it's going to take a while to weed through all that. But, a great breakthrough in this past session, which is about like what is preventing you from staying present. And really what it all comes down to for us, like a major unlock, is that we essentially don't have unconditional self-love. How many times do we consider ourselves like, I'm a piece of shit, or imposter syndrome, or I'm not good enough, or, I need to prove myself to somebody, all this stuff, right? Instead of believing like I am enough. And so our love for ourselves is conditional. And when you can accept unconditional self-love, then you can start to be fully present. And it's interesting because, part of what prevents us from that is our beliefs. Now, we think it's the thoughts, and we think if we just change the thought or catch the thought, some people say, to be present, you got to just like catch your thought. And yes, that's one thing, but when you catch the thought, you have to go a little bit deeper with that and see what the underlying belief system is. Because, the fact of the matter is, our thoughts don't create our beliefs. Our beliefs create our thoughts. Now, that might sound like a banal platitude, but really, it's much deeper than that. What it gets at is we've adopted, these operating systems, right? We've altered how we function based on our belief system. Even something as simple as Rene Descartes' "I think, therefore I am," while well-intentioned, submits to a false belief. I think, therefore I am. So then, that in itself makes one believe, okay, my thoughts are real, and that is what makes me real. And it's like, no, I am consciousness, therefore I am. Right? A seemingly subtle difference, but with major implications. When people say words matter, they do. Because what we inherently believe is what literally dictates our life. I want to write this book called "Why Am I Licking the Lamppost?" And the reason it's called that is because if we saw someone licking a lamppost, we would look at them and like, something must be up with them. And yet, in life, there's a lot of times we feel or know that, we keep repeating negative patterns, but we don't know why, right? It's a metaphor, like we are ourselves licking a lamppost, and we don't know why. Well, the why of it all is the beliefs within us. And as Diedrich Walczak would say, we get to choose again, right? And how you get to that is through exploration, questioning, and so forth. And it's very deep work, and it is work, but it's possible. And when you can start to do that, that's where you can get to that phase of it all where you realize, wow, how can I be present when I don't love myself unconditionally? And why don't I love myself unconditionally, right? These are all very interesting things. And, one of the deeper truths is, another aspect of it all is this belief that I have to be right, it's David Foster Wallace in This Is Water talks about this deep, unspoken, insidious truth that we believe we're the center of our universe. After all, every experience we've had, as he states, is experienced through our own viewpoint, right? And it just reinforces that, our own immediate needs and wants and desires. Other people's thoughts have to be communicated to us, And it's weird how that can take place. And then, we fear the unknown. We fear anything, and because God forbid we're not right, and it's just very fascinating to have essentially gone down that path and had these revelations, and then see things from a different perspective, right? Because the fact of the matter is, I think a lot of this stuff works in tandem. But even so, you have to pursue it. That's why I call myself a 360 creative coach, because I try to pursue all these at once, which some people are like, wait, you got to just focus on one thing. And it's like, no, it's all part and parcel of it all. Because here's an example, right? Many will try to cure themselves through their diets and exercise. And listen, that's not wrong. You should do that. But again, if there's this deep belief working against you, excuse me, how can you break through that operating system, just purely doing that? And the interesting part that I found, now, by being present alone, you extend your life, because, you're going to be more conscious in every single moment, as opposed to this zombie, right? This proverbial zombie sleepwalking through life. So that already extends your life, regardless of diet and anything else. Now, the beautiful part, as I'm experiencing it, is by having that unconditional self-love, you start to realize of why would I, put crap in my body or do X, Y, and Z, right? So it's just a beast that essentially feeds itself. Again, that's why all these things work in tandem as opposed to separate. And I'm still kind of processing all of it, and certainly we'll be exploring this notion further down the line. But yeah, that's the unlock of it all, is to ask yourself, if I'm not present, why aren't I present? And the key is, what is preventing you from unconditional self-love? I would explore that. Anyway, yeah, that's what I have for you. Like I said, it's been a kaleidoscope of stuff, watching movies, making movies, starting new projects, therapy, cooking classes, seeing friends. It's been a great week, right? And I think it's been a great week, not because it's necessarily, some of the stuff is out of the ordinary from my, week-to-week routine. But really, it's just being more present and having that unlocked and being oh, wow, you can find the beauty in the day-to-day. And that's really powerful. So that's what I have for you. Thank you, as always. If you have any questions or thoughts of your own, as I'm sure you do, please comment down below or hit me up on social media. All the things that I have mentioned I've tried to link to down in the description box, including if you're interested in my coaching sessions, right? If you feel I would be of benefit to you on a more direct level, that is available to you. Now, if perhaps you want to kind of dip your toe in, so to speak, well, that's what my Patreon page is for, patreon.com/Svitek. There's various tiers of support there, and with various rewards for that. So that's a nice way to kind of see what it's all about. Likewise, I've made mention of my creative projects, the movies, the books, merchandise, and so forth. All that is available to you. And in fact, supporting that stuff does help support this, because by having that be standalone, I can create more of it and thus learn and share that experience and that knowledge freely here with you to help you out. Right? That is the goal. Anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I'll see you next time.